The night was alive with glimmering lights and the soft murmur of chatter as guests filed into the grand ballroom of one of the city's most luxurious hotels. Marble floors reflected the chandeliers above, casting a golden hue over everything. The space buzzed with the aura of wealth, power, and status. Expensive designer dresses, bespoke suits, and glittering jewelry adorned everyone in attendance. The occasion? A prestigious charity gala hosted by Marcus Kane, the revered CEO of Kane Enterprises, a multinational company with influence stretching across industries and borders. Among the attendees stood a young woman named Emily Hart. Unlike most of the guests, Emily wasn't part of this glittering world. She had received an invitation through her boss, a philanthropist who had made a name for himself in charitable circles. Emily had never been to an event of this magnitude. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, she worked hard to become a marketing executive for a non-profit organization. Her life was far from glamorous, but she believed in the work she did. Tonight, however, she was stepping into a different world, a world of excess, luxury, and judgment. As she stood by the entrance, her nerves fluttered. Her dress, a simple but elegant piece she had saved up for, paled in comparison to the couture gowns worn by other women around her. In her hands, she held a modestly wrapped gift, an item she had carefully selected for the charity auction that was part of the evening's event. The gift wasn't expensive or extravagant, but it carried meaning. It was a handcrafted photo frame, delicately carved by a local artist in her neighborhood, someone who had been struggling but poured his heart into his work. As Emily made her way deeper into the ballroom, she felt eyes lingering on her. Whispers followed her footsteps. She could feel it, the silent judgment, the stares that seemed to question her presence at an event like this. She wasn't from this world, and she didn't belong here. Not really. At the center of the ballroom stood a group of women, impeccably dressed, champagne glasses in hand. Their conversation halted as Emily approached the display table where guests were placing their auction items. One woman, tall and striking in a glittering silver gown, eyed Emily's humble gift with a raised eyebrow. "Is that your contribution to the auction?" the woman asked, her voice dripping with condescension. Emily's heart raced, but she nodded, forcing a polite smile. "Yes, it's a handcrafted photo frame," the woman interrupted, laughing. "How quaint." The others in the group giggled, their eyes flicking between Emily and the elegant diamond-encrusted items on the table, a rare painting, an antique vase, jewelry from a famous designer. Compared to those, Emily's gift seemed insignificant, almost laughable. "Darling, this is a luxury charity event," another woman chimed in, her tone equally dismissive. "I'm not sure your little trinket fits the occasion." Emily felt her face flush. She had known her gift wasn't as lavish as the others, but she hadn't expected such open ridicule. For a moment, she considered taking it back, walking out of the ballroom and leaving this world behind. But something stopped her. She had chosen the gift because it had meaning, because it represented the hard work of someone who, like her, wasn't wealthy but cared deeply about what they did. Taking a deep breath, she set the frame on the table. "It may not be expensive, but it's made with heart. I think that's what matters." The group of women exchanged amused glances, their laughter soft but sharp enough to sting. Emily walked away, her head held high, but inside, she felt small. It was a cruel reminder of the vast divide between her world and theirs. As the evening wore on, Emily tried to enjoy herself. She found a few familiar faces, other guests from the non-profit sector, and made small talk, but her mind kept drifting back to the women's mocking words. She couldn't help but feel out of place, as though her presence here was a mistake. Then, the auction began. One by one, the items were presented on stage, each more extravagant than the last. The audience applauded, and bids soared into the thousands, tens of thousands even. Emily watched in silence, knowing that when her gift came up, it would pale in comparison. Finally, the auctioneer lifted the handcrafted photo frame. "And next, we have a unique contribution, a beautiful, handcrafted photo frame made by a local artisan. Starting bid, $50. There was a brief silence, followed by a few murmurs from the crowd. The women who had mocked Emily earlier exchanged amused glances, clearly expecting no bids to come. Emily's heart sank. This was it, the moment of rejection, where her humble gift would be publicly deemed worthless. But then, something unexpected happened. "I'll take it," a voice called from the back of the room. The crowd turned, surprised. Standing near the entrance was Marcus Kane, the CEO of Kane Enterprises himself. He walked forward, his presence commanding attention. Tall, charismatic, and impeccably dressed, Marcus was a man who exuded confidence. He was known not only for his business acumen but also for his philanthropy and ability to connect with people from all walks of life. "I'll bid $5,000, Marcus said calmly. The room went silent. The auctioneer blinked, momentarily caught off guard. $5,000, going once. Marcus raised a hand, signaling to pause the auction. "Before you finish," he said, his voice steady, "I'd like to share a story." The audience, now fully captivated, waited in anticipation. "A long time ago," Marcus began, "I wasn't the man you see standing here today. I didn't have the money, the power, or the success. I came from a humble background. My mother worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. And one of the few things she had time for, despite all the struggles, was crafting photo frames, just like this one. She'd make them by hand, and they'd be the most beautiful things in our house. They weren't expensive or fancy, but they were filled with love and care." The crowd listened, transfixed. "I remember giving one of her frames as a gift once," Marcus continued, his gaze sweeping across the room. "It was at a party much like this one, filled with people who had far more than I did. And just like tonight, I was mocked for it. People laughed at the idea that something so simple could be worth anything. But I held on to the belief that the value of a gift isn't in its price, but in the heart behind it." Emily stood frozen, her eyes wide. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected him. "This frame," Marcus said, lifting the handcrafted piece, "is a reminder. A reminder that we all start somewhere, and that the value of something, whether it's a gift, a person, or an idea, can't always be measured by how much it costs." The room was silent. The women who had mocked Emily shifted uncomfortably, their earlier smugness gone. "I'll keep my bid at $5,000, Marcus concluded, smiling warmly. "And I hope that from now on, we'll all remember that sometimes the most meaningful things come from the humblest places." The auctioneer, regaining his composure, banged the gavel. "Sold for $5,000 to Mr. Kane." Applause erupted from the crowd, and Emily felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She had never expected her simple gift to receive such recognition, let alone from someone as powerful as Marcus Kane. As the evening continued, people approached her, complimenting the frame and asking about its origins. The women who had mocked her earlier. They stayed silent, their haughty expressions replaced with discomfort. As the night drew to a close, Emily found herself standing by the exit, watching the remaining guests trickle out. She felt a hand on her shoulder and turned to see Marcus standing beside her. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. "No need to thank me," Marcus replied with a smile. "Your gift spoke for itself. Never underestimate the power of something made with heart." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Emily standing in the golden glow of the ballroom lights, a quiet sense of pride swelling in her chest. For the first time that night, she felt like she truly belonged. Chapter 1. The invitation. The city glittered under the fading light of dusk, and the grand ballroom of the Renaissance Hotel was no exception. With its marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and gold accents, the ballroom exuded luxury in every corner. The evening's event, the annual charity gala hosted by the powerful Marcus Kane, CEO of Kane Enterprises, was one of the most anticipated social events of the year. Politicians, celebrities, and the business elite mingled effortlessly, sipping champagne as they prepared to showcase their wealth and status. But standing quietly at the edge of this grandeur was Emily Hart, a young woman whose presence was anything but typical. Her invitation had come as a surprise. As a marketing executive for a modest nonprofit organization, Emily wasn't accustomed to events of this caliber. Her boss, Mr. Carter, a well-known philanthropist, had been unable to attend and had offered her the invitation as a way of making connections for their cause. Emily had accepted, excited yet nervous about stepping into a world so different from her own. Her dress, a simple but elegant navy blue gown, was carefully chosen, polished enough to blend in, but clearly not designer. In her hands, she clutched a small, modestly wrapped gift. It was her contribution to the charity auction, a handcrafted photo frame she had purchased from a local artisan in her neighborhood. It wasn't extravagant like the gifts she assumed others would bring, but it had meaning. The artist, an elderly man named Mr. Jacobs, had spent hours crafting it, carefully carving intricate designs into the wood. It represented more than money, it represented heart, effort, and creativity. As Emily walked into the ballroom, her eyes widened at the spectacle before her. The wealth on display was staggering, diamond-studded gowns, watches that likely cost more than her entire apartment, and conversations revolving around yachts, private jets, and million-dollar deals. She felt a wave of insecurity wash over her but tried to push it aside. After all, she was here for a purpose, to represent her organization and maybe even secure some support for their causes, but as she approached the auction table, where guests were placing their donations for the evening, she noticed a group of women standing nearby. They were dressed in stunning designer outfits, their perfectly coiffed hair and flawless makeup giving them an air of untouchable sophistication. One of them, a tall woman with striking blonde hair, glanced at the gift Emily was holding and smirked. "Is that your donation?" the woman asked, her voice sweet but laced with condescension. Emily swallowed hard but nodded. "Yes, it's a handcrafted photo frame," another woman chimed in, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "How quaint." The group giggled softly, their laughter barely veiled behind fake smiles. Emily's cheeks flushed. She had expected to feel a bit out of place, but the open mockery stung more than she anticipated. She forced herself to smile, determined not to let their words affect her. "It's from a local artist," Emily explained, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "He put a lot of time into creating it." The blonde woman tilted her head as if considering Emily's words, then let out a light laugh. "Well, it's certainly unique. But I'm not sure it fits the theme of the evening. Most of us are donating, higher-end pieces, you know." The other women chuckled again, their attention drifting back to the sparkling jewelry, expensive artwork, and luxury items that filled the donation table. Emily could feel her resolve wavering. Her contribution looked tiny and insignificant compared to the extravagance around her. But she took a deep breath and placed the frame on the table, reminding herself that value wasn't always about price. With her head held high, she walked away from the group, though the sting of their words lingered. She tried to lose herself in the atmosphere of the gala, but every time she saw someone glance at her modest dress or noticed the whispers as she passed, the insecurities resurfaced. She wondered if she should have even come. Hours passed, and soon the main event began, the charity auction. Emily sat quietly at her table, surrounded by business moguls and celebrities, none of whom she recognized. The auctioneer took the stage, announcing each item with excitement as bids skyrocketed for expensive paintings, diamond necklaces, and rare antiques. Then, the auctioneer lifted her photo frame, and next, "We have a handcrafted photo frame, generously donated by one of our attendees," the man announced. His tone was polite, but it lacked the enthusiasm he'd shown for the previous items. Starting bid at $50. Emily braced herself for silence. She knew her donation wasn't flashy, and she could already hear the murmurs from the crowd. No one would bid on this. Just as the auctioneer was about to move on, a deep voice called from the back of the room. "I'll take it," the man said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The room turned to see Marcus Kane himself, standing with a calm yet commanding presence. He began walking toward the stage, his tailored suit perfectly crisp, his confidence unshakable. As the CEO of Kane Enterprises, Marcus was a figure both respected and feared in the business world. His every word carried weight, and tonight, it seemed, he had something to say. "I'll start the bidding at $5,000, Marcus announced, his voice firm. The room fell silent, stunned. The crowd exchanged puzzled looks, and the women who had mocked Emily earlier shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Marcus raised his hand slightly to pause the auctioneer and turned to face the crowd. "Before we continue," he began, "I'd like to say a few words about this particular item." Emily felt her heart pound in her chest. She wasn't sure what was about to happen, but she knew Marcus Kane wasn't the kind of man who acted without purpose. "This photo frame," Marcus continued, lifting the modest piece with care, "may not have the same price tag as the other items tonight, but let me tell you why it matters. Years ago, I grew up in a small, working-class neighborhood. My mother used to make photo frames just like this, handcrafted with love and care, because that's all we had. We didn't have expensive things, but we had pride in the work we did." The room was dead silent now, every eye fixed on Marcus. "The value of this frame isn't in its price," he said, his voice resonating through the room. "It's in the heart behind it. It's a reminder of where we come from, of the people who work hard every day to create something meaningful. It's easy to write a check for a diamond necklace, but it's harder to put love and craftsmanship into something as simple as this." He turned back to the auctioneer. "I'm bidding $5,000. Anyone else?" The room was still, but no one dared challenge Marcus's bid. After a moment, the auctioneer's gavel came down with a resounding crack. Sold, for $5,000 to Mr. Marcus Kane. The room erupted into applause, but for Emily, everything had gone still. Her heart swelled with emotion, shock, gratitude, disbelief. She had never expected anyone, let alone someone as powerful as Marcus Kane, to recognize the value of her gift. As she sat there, she realized that the evening had shifted in a way she couldn't have predicted. For the first time that night, Emily felt truly seen. Chapter 2, a new opportunity. The applause echoed around the grand ballroom, but for Emily, it felt distant, like the sound was muffled under a blanket of disbelief. She sat frozen, still processing what had just happened. Marcus Kane, the CEO of one of the largest corporations in the country, had just bid $5,000 on her handcrafted photo frame, and, more than that, had defended it in front of the entire room. Her mind raced, trying to grasp the gravity of the moment. As the auction moved on to the next item, Emily stood up, feeling the need to step outside and breathe. She slipped through the crowd, her heart pounding, her hands trembling slightly. She could still hear whispers from the guests, but this time they weren't mocking. Instead, they were filled with curiosity, about her story, about the unexpected turn of events that had left everyone stunned. The cool night air hit her face as she stepped out onto the terrace, taking a deep breath. The city skyline sparkled in the distance, a sharp contrast to the turmoil of emotions swirling inside her. She leaned against the railing, trying to ground herself, when a voice behind her broke the silence. "You seem like you could use some air." Emily turned around, startled, to find Marcus Kane standing there, his hands casually tucked into his pockets, a warm but curious expression on his face. Yes, she stammered, trying to regain her composure. "That was unexpected." Marcus smiled, his presence both commanding and calming. "I'm sure it was. I didn't mean to put you on the spot in there, but I felt the need to speak up." I don't know what to say," Emily admitted, her cheeks flushing. "That was incredibly kind of you." Marcus stepped closer, leaning against the railing next to her, his gaze thoughtful as he looked out over the city. "It wasn't kindness, Emily. It was respect. I know what it feels like to be in a room full of people who don't understand the value of hard work. Your gift, it represented something real. That's worth more than most people in that room will ever understand." His words hit her like a wave, and for a moment, Emily couldn't respond. She had always felt out of place in environments like this, surrounded by wealth and privilege. But Marcus's recognition, his respect for something so personal, made her feel as though she belonged in a way she never had before. I really didn't expect anyone to appreciate it," Emily said softly, her voice carrying a hint of vulnerability. "It's just a simple frame." Marcus turned to face her, his gaze steady. "Sometimes the simplest things carry the most weight. And sometimes, people need to be reminded of that." Emily nodded, feeling the warmth of his words settle into her heart. She hadn't expected any of this, certainly not a conversation with one of the most influential men in the city, let alone his support. The night had taken a turn she never could have anticipated. Before she could respond, Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then looked back at her apologetically. "I'm sorry, I have to take this. But Emily, I'd like to talk to you more. There's something I've been thinking about since the auction, and I think it could be an opportunity for you." Emily's eyes widened. "An opportunity?" "Yes," Marcus replied, his tone serious but encouraging. "I'll be in touch soon. I think there's more we can do together." With that, he gave her a quick nod and walked back inside, leaving Emily standing on the terrace, her thoughts racing. An opportunity with Marcus Kane? What could that possibly mean? Her mind whirled with possibilities, but she knew one thing for sure: this night was only the beginning of something far bigger than she had ever imagined. Chapter 3, The Proposal. 2 days after the gala, Emily sat at her desk in the small office of the nonprofit where she worked. The faint hum of the air conditioner was the only sound in the room as she tried to focus on her usual tasks. But her thoughts kept drifting back to Marcus's words. What kind of opportunity could he have been referring to? She felt a mix of excitement and apprehension, excited for the possibilities but also nervous about what it would mean for her future. Her phone rang, snapping her out of her thoughts. She glanced at the caller ID. It was Mr. Carter, her boss. "Emily, you've got a meeting," he said without preamble. "A meeting? With who?" "Marcus Kane's office. They called this morning, asking for you specifically. I don't know what you did at that gala, but clearly, you impressed the right people. Emily's heart skipped a beat. It was happening. When's the meeting? Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. I expect you'll want to prepare. She hung up the phone, her pulse quickening. This was it. The opportunity Marcus had hinted at. But what exactly did he want from her? That night, Emily barely slept. She rehearsed possible conversations in her head, wondering what role she could play at a company like Kane Enterprises. The possibilities seemed endless, but so did the uncertainties. She wasn't from the world of corporate power, and stepping into Marcus's orbit felt like stepping onto a new planet. The next morning, dressed in her best business attire, Emily walked through the towering glass doors of Kane Enterprises. The building itself was a marvel, sleek, modern, and imposing. She rode the elevator to the top floor, her nerves jangling with each passing second. When she stepped into the conference room, she found Marcus waiting for her. He stood by the window, overlooking the city skyline. The executive team wasn't present this time, it was just the two of them. Emily, he greeted her warmly, gesturing for her to take a seat. Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me, she replied, her voice steady despite the nerves. Marcus sat across from her, his gaze focused. I wanted to talk to you about something I've been considering for a while now. After the gala, I realized you're exactly the kind of person who could help bring it to life. Emily leaned forward slightly, her curiosity piqued. What is it? We've been expanding our corporate social responsibility efforts, and I've been thinking about starting a new initiative, a program that would help local artisans and small businesses, people like the man who made that photo frame. We'd provide them with resources, mentorship, and the opportunity to scale their work. It's a way to give back, but also to promote craftsmanship and creativity in a world that's increasingly driven by mass production. Emily's eyes widened. This was far beyond anything she had expected. That sounds incredible. Marcus smiled. I think it could be, but I need someone to lead it, someone who understands both the grassroots side of things and the larger impact we can make. And I think that someone is you. Emily's heart raced. You want me to lead this? I do, Marcus replied without hesitation. I've seen your passion, your dedication to your work. This isn't just about corporate philanthropy, it's about making real change. I believe you're the right person to help me do that. For a moment, Emily was speechless. This was more than an opportunity, it was a dream come true. To lead a project that aligned so perfectly with her values, with the work she had dedicated her life to, it felt almost too good to be true. I would be honored, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But are you sure I'm the right person for this? I've never led something on this scale. Marcus nodded. I have no doubt you can do it. We'll start small, but I want this to grow into something impactful, something global. You'll have the resources and the team to make it happen, but the vision will be yours to shape. Emily's mind was spinning, but in the best possible way. This was the kind of opportunity that came once in a lifetime, and Marcus was offering it to her on a silver platter. She knew she couldn't let fear or self-doubt hold her back. I'm all in, she said, her voice steady with newfound resolve. Let's do this. Marcus smiled, his expression one of satisfaction. I knew you would be. Welcome aboard, Emily. Let's change the world. And with that, Emily's life shifted in a way she had never anticipated. What had started as a single moment of vulnerability at a charity gala had now turned into the biggest opportunity of her career, and perhaps, the start of a journey that would change not only her life but the lives of countless others. Chapter 4, The beginning of heartbreak. The months following Emily's decision to lead the new initiative were a whirlwind of meetings, brainstorming sessions, and late nights spent drafting proposals. The project, now officially named Heartmade, aimed to provide local artisans with resources, support, and the connections they needed to grow their businesses. The name came from the idea that every handcrafted item carried a piece of the creator's heart and passion. Emily worked closely with Marcus and his team, quickly becoming a key player in the development of Heartmade. Marcus, true to his word, gave her the creative freedom to shape the project, while offering his support and guidance whenever she needed it. Together, they built a framework that would allow small artisans to apply for funding, access mentorship, and eventually connect with larger markets both domestically and internationally. The initiative also included training programs, helping artisans build the skills needed to manage their growing businesses and navigate the competitive world of retail. Heartmade started small, focusing on artisans from various neighborhoods across the city. Many of these creators had been overlooked by traditional business models, and the opportunity to showcase their work to a larger audience was a dream come true. Word of the initiative spread quickly, and soon, applications began pouring in from across the country. As the program grew, Emily found herself traveling frequently to visit different communities. Each artisan had a story, and each craft carried a piece of their history. She met weavers in rural towns who had passed their techniques down through generations, sculptors who transformed scrap metal into stunning works of art, and painters whose works told stories of their cultural heritage. The diversity of talent amazed her, and she felt honored to be a part of something that was helping these people share their gifts with the world. Through it all, Marcus remained involved, though he often let Emily take the lead. His faith in her abilities empowered her to push harder, dream bigger, and build something sustainable. She began to realize that Marcus's initial gesture at the gala had been more than an act of kindness, it was an acknowledgement of her potential. However, with success came challenges. As Heartmade gained recognition, they began attracting attention from investors and major corporations looking to collaborate. Some of these corporations were more interested in profits than in supporting local artisans, and Emily found herself having to navigate tricky waters. There were moments where she questioned if the initiative could remain true to its mission, especially as it scaled up. One particular meeting with a large retail chain left her feeling uneasy. The company offered significant funding but demanded a large share of the profits and wanted to mass-produce the artisans' works. They even suggested streamlining production to make the items more marketable, which went against everything Heartmade stood for. Emily sat in the conference room, her fingers clasped tightly around a pen as the corporate executives across from her outlined their plan. "We're offering an incredible opportunity here," one of the executives said, his tone smooth but patronizing. "This will bring these artisans' work to the masses. Think of how many units we could sell with proper branding and production scaling." Emily shook her head slowly. The artisans we're working with take pride in their craftsmanship. Each piece is unique and carries personal meaning. Mass production would strip that away. That's not what Heartmade is about. The executive leaned back in his chair, clearly frustrated. "Emily, I think you're missing the bigger picture here. We're talking about major exposure, the kind that could turn this program into a global phenomenon." "That may be true," she replied firmly, "but not at the cost of sacrificing the integrity of what we're trying to build. Heartmade isn't about maximizing profit, it's about supporting the people behind the products, giving them the space to grow on their own terms." The tension in the room was palpable. Emily felt the weight of their stares, but she refused to back down. She knew that Heartmade had to remain authentic if it was going to make a lasting impact. After the meeting, Emily returned to her office, her mind still buzzing with thoughts of the corporate pressure she was facing. She had built this initiative to be about empowerment, not exploitation. She knew that in order to succeed, she needed to stay true to the core values that had driven the project from the start. Later that evening, as she sat in her office contemplating the future, Marcus appeared at the door. "You look like you've had a rough day," he said, stepping inside with a smile. Emily sighed, leaning back in her chair. "Rough might be an understatement. The investors are pushing for more control, and I'm worried that if we let them in, Heartmade will lose what makes it special." Marcus sat across from her, his expression thoughtful. "I trust your judgment, Emily. If you feel like their proposals compromise the integrity of what we're doing, then we don't need to move forward with them. I'm not interested in making this project about mass production. It's about creating real change for real people." Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Thank you. I needed to hear that. Remember why we started this," Marcus said. "We wanted to give people a platform to showcase their work, not exploit their talents for profit. As long as we stay true to that, Heartmade will succeed." The reassurance from Marcus gave Emily the strength she needed to push through the challenges. In the months that followed, she turned down several corporate partnerships that didn't align with Heartmade's mission, opting instead to focus on sustainable growth. The initiative continued to expand, but it did so on its own terms, with a focus on preserving the authenticity of the artisan's work. Chapter 5, Heartmade Global. A year after the launch of Heartmade, the initiative had not only grown but flourished. It was no longer just a local program, it had become a national movement. Artisans from across the country were gaining recognition, their works being showcased in galleries, online platforms, and even high-end retail stores, stores that shared Heartmade's values and were willing to support artisans without compromising their vision. But Emily wasn't satisfied. She had bigger dreams for Heartmade. One afternoon, as she sat in a meeting with Marcus and the executive team, she presented a bold new idea. "I think it's time we go global," she announced, her voice filled with excitement. The room went quiet as everyone processed her statement. "I've been researching artisans in developing countries," Emily continued, "and there's so much untapped talent out there. These creators have incredible skills, but they lack the resources and connections to bring their work to a larger market. What if Heartmade could provide them with that platform? We could create a global network of artisans, giving them the support they need while also promoting fair trade and sustainable practices." Marcus smiled, clearly impressed by her vision. "It's ambitious, but I like it. What would you need to make it happen?" Emily's heart raced. She had been preparing for this moment for months, researching how to expand Heartmade beyond the borders of the U.S. She pulled out a proposal outlining partnerships with international nonprofits, fair trade organizations, and local governments that could help facilitate the program's global reach. "I've already started conversations with a few organizations that specialize in international development," she explained. "If we partner with them, we can ensure that Heartmade maintains its core values while expanding to new regions. It's going to take time, but I believe we can create something truly transformative." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Let's do it." And so, Heartmade Global was born. Emily traveled to villages in Africa, Asia, and South America, meeting artisans who were eager to share their craft with the world. In Kenya, she met a group of women who wove intricate baskets by hand, each one telling a story of their heritage and community. In India, she worked with metalworkers who transformed discarded materials into stunning pieces of art. In Peru, she visited textile artists who had been using the same techniques for generations, creating vibrant, colorful fabrics that reflected their culture. With each new partnership, Heartmade's reach expanded. It wasn't just about selling products, it was about creating lasting, meaningful relationships with the artisans and ensuring they were empowered to succeed on their own terms. Chapter 6: The Global Expansion. The expansion of Heartmade Global was not without its challenges, but each obstacle only strengthened Emily's resolve. Her travels took her to remote parts of the world, where she encountered not only new cultures and traditions but also the harsh realities faced by artisans struggling to survive. Many lived in poverty, isolated from any larger markets. For them, their craft wasn't just a way of life, it was their sole means of survival. But their work was often overlooked, their talents unappreciated by a global audience that sought cheaper, mass-produced goods. Emily worked tirelessly to ensure that Heartmade stayed true to its mission of authenticity. She spent long days in the field, meeting artisans, learning about their work, and ensuring that the program provided them with the resources they truly needed, without compromising their integrity or creativity. In Kenya, she stood in the shade of a baobab tree, surrounded by women who sat weaving baskets from dried grass, their hands deftly twisting and turning the material into beautiful, intricate designs. One of the women, a matriarch of the village named Wanjiku, spoke to Emily through a translator. "These baskets," Wanjiku said, "have been made by the women of this village for hundreds of years. But the market is limited, and sometimes we sell them for barely enough to buy food for our families. We want to share our work, but not if it means losing what makes it special." Emily nodded, understanding Wanjiku's concern all too well. Heartmade was about more than just selling products, it was about preserving the heritage and traditions of the artisans, while giving them the opportunity to share their work with a broader audience on their own terms. "Your work is beautiful," Emily said, her voice sincere. "And we'll make sure that when people see these baskets, they understand the care and history that goes into every piece. We'll help you reach a wider market, but only if it's done in a way that respects your craft." Wanjiku smiled, her face lighting up with hope. "That's all we ask." With that assurance, Emily left Kenya knowing that Heartmade was making a real difference in the lives of these artisans. It wasn't just about profits or expansion, it was about honoring the work and the stories behind each creation. As the months passed, Heartmade's global reach grew. The initiative partnered with fair trade organizations and ethical retailers who shared their values. Artisans from all over the world, India, Mexico, Morocco, and beyond, were able to showcase their work through online platforms, as well as in carefully curated stores that highlighted their craftsmanship. Emily often reflected on how far Heartmade had come. What had started as a simple gift at a charity gala had blossomed into a worldwide movement, one that empowered creators and connected consumers with meaningful, ethically produced goods. But more than that, it had changed Emily's life in ways she had never imagined. One afternoon, during a brief return to the US, Emily found herself in a cafe, sipping coffee as she went through her notes on the latest project, an artisan collective in Peru that had caught her attention. As she worked, her phone buzzed with a familiar name. It was Marcus Kane. Emily, his voice came through the phone, calm as always, but with an undertone of urgency. I need you to come to the office tomorrow. There's something important I need to discuss. Her heart skipped a beat. Marcus was usually straightforward, so his tone made her uneasy. What could be so urgent? Is everything all right? She asked. Everything's fine, he reassured her. But we need to talk about the future of HeartMade. Emily agreed, but after hanging up, she couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty. Had something gone wrong? Was HeartMade in trouble? Chapter 7. A difficult decision. The next morning, Emily walked into the glass tower of Kane Enterprises, feeling a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She had worked with Marcus for over a year now, and they had built a strong partnership. But Marcus had never summoned her so urgently before. She was shown into his office, a large space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Marcus was already standing by the window, looking out thoughtfully. He turned when she entered, giving her a small smile. Emily, thank you for coming, he said, motioning for her to sit. There's a lot to discuss. Emily sat, her heart racing slightly. What's going on, Marcus? He took a deep breath, leaning forward slightly. You've done extraordinary work with HeartMade. More than I ever imagined. But now we're at a crossroads. Emily frowned, confused. What do you mean? The global expansion has been a huge success, Marcus explained. And investors are taking notice. They're seeing the potential for HeartMade to become something even bigger, something that could disrupt the entire retail industry. They're talking about scaling it up in ways that go far beyond what we've done so far. A knot began to form in Emily's stomach. She could sense where this was heading, and it wasn't a path she wanted to take. They want to franchise HeartMade, Marcus said finally. Turn it into a brand that's recognized worldwide, with retail stores in every major city. They see dollar signs, Emily. And they're pushing hard. Emily's mind raced. She had spent so much time ensuring that HeartMade stayed true to its mission. The thought of turning it into a massive, franchised retail brand made her sick. It went against everything they had worked for. Marcus, we can't do that, she said firmly. HeartMade isn't about profits. It's about supporting artisans, respecting their work, and making sure they're empowered to succeed. If we franchise it, we'll lose that. The whole point of HeartMade is that it's different. Marcus nodded, his expression serious. I know. And I agree with you. But the pressure from the investors is growing. They see HeartMade as the next big thing, and they're willing to pour millions into it to make that happen. Emily's heart sank. She had worked too hard, come too far, to see HeartMade become just another corporate machine. But at the same time, she knew that turning down this kind of investment could limit their ability to expand and help more artisans. What do you want to do, Marcus? She asked quietly, her eyes searching his face. Marcus leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. I want to protect what we've built. But I also know that if we turn down the investors, we'll be putting a cap on HeartMade's growth. It will remain a niche program, and we may not be able to help as many people as we could with more funding. Emily felt a wave of frustration and sadness. Why did it always come down to this? Money versus integrity, growth versus authenticity. She had always known that these challenges would arise, but she hadn't expected them to come so soon, or with such high stakes. I need you to help me make this decision, Marcus said, his voice softer now. You've been the heart of this initiative. Whatever direction we take, I want it to be one we can both stand behind. Emily sat in silence, thinking. She knew that the decision they made now would shape the future of HeartMade, and her own future as well. If they chose to scale up, there was no turning back. HeartMade could become a global phenomenon, but at what cost? Would it still carry the same meaning, or would it become another faceless brand? But if they stayed small, there would be limits. They wouldn't be able to reach as many artisans, help as many people, or make as big of an impact. After what felt like an eternity, Emily spoke. Marcus, I think we need to find a middle ground. We can expand HeartMade, but we have to do it in a way that preserves its values. If the investors are serious, they need to understand that this isn't about mass production or franchising. We need partners who are aligned with our mission, who are willing to invest in artisans, not just profits. Marcus nodded slowly, a small smile forming on his face. I knew you'd say that. And I agree. We'll need to be careful, but I think we can find the right partners. Emily felt a sense of relief wash over her. It wasn't going to be easy, but she knew they were making the right decision. They could grow Heartmade, help more people, and still stay true to the heart of what they had built. Thank you, Marcus, she said softly. For trusting me. Thank you, Emily, he replied, his gaze steady. For reminding me of what really matters. And with that, they began to chart a new course for Heartmade, one that would allow it to grow while staying true to the artisans who had inspired its creation. It would take time, effort, and careful negotiation, but Emily knew they were on the right path. This was only the beginning.